Mr. Oltetia, many would argue that you are going ahead of yourselves by floating a bond. Perhaps what would be your message to the market, especially now that we're seeing we're also heading into another election cycle, and of course the economy is usually interlinked with politics. Perhaps the timing of the bond, are you confident it will attract positive sentiment across the market? At the same time, what are your projections in terms of what you look to raise from this bond issuance?
Thank you, and that's a very good question. So timing is very key. Going to capital markets, timing is always the most important thing. So you recall that we started making announcement about KMRC going to the market last year. And that was sometimes in March. It's actually in our strategy to issue a bond. So we went to the market straight from March last year, getting the transaction advisors, etc. Now, in the course, we wanted to issue the bond last year, and in the process, two corporates came to the market ahead of us. That is East African Breweries and Family Bank. Now, we didn't want to come to the market all at the same time. So we had to obviously carefully look at what is the appropriate timing for us. And the other thing, of course, we had to consider was the approvals that we had to seek from the regulators. Now, we only got the approvals this year. And that means that we had to issue the bond within the year. But this is the most appropriate time. So I think at the moment, I think it's only KMRC which is in the market. We expect a massive oversubscription. And the reason why we believe this way is because KMRC is this massive small institution. So it has a very good credit. It has a very strong balance sheet. It has a very strong governance framework. It's certainly supported by strong institutions, not least government. We have the World Bank, African Development Bank, IFC. So we have local institutions. The largest banks we have in this country are part of this question. And then we have a number of SACCOs, which are also the largest SACCOs we have in this country. So they're all backing up this institution for a reason, because they know that KMRC certainly has a very huge impact that it creates in our market. We expect the market to scale up over time, and a lot more housing units that are affordable will come into the market, and then we see a bigger pipeline from the financial institutions, and then we go to the market maybe next year to issue a 4.5 billion or something like plus that next year. And then the last of the tranches will be issued maybe in 2024, and it will obviously be the difference.
All right. And of course, looking at the big picture, I just want to get your overall assessment in terms of mortgage uptake. Are you seeing an improvement? And at the same time, by all this falling in place, how will it position our mortgage market? Especially knowing very well that also the formal population of people who are in salaried jobs and the vis-a-vis those who are in the informal sector but are also earning salaries in the name of wages. There is a big gap, especially in the low end. When you look at even the developers, like you did allude to earlier, that there seems to be, we need a paradigm shift. Because when you look at developers who are doing low end, their units are moving much faster compared to the ones doing high end. But from your vantage point and your interactions with data and of course market players, how does the mortgage outlook look like for Kenya? At the same time, how can we make housing, home ownership much cheaper?
Thank you. So we are going to shift that, and that is exactly why we are talking about creating a more significant impact in the lower part of the market. And that's where the market is. Actually, for anyone who is considering housing right now, the market is not on the upper part as it has been, but now on the lower end. And that's why you're talking about units that are being developed at the low end are going faster. And they will certainly even go faster as we scale up the developments. Now, so at the moment, you realize that before KMRC came in, of course, it's been a challenge accessing home ownership. That will no longer be a problem because that has since been solved. Now, the challenge we're still facing is on the supply, which is the development of those units. And development doesn't move as fast. And then with the affordability that's already there, with the extension of the repayment timelines, from an average of 8 years, because I think based on the statistic from the Central Bank for 2019, it's been about 8 to 11 years maximum. But the biggest impact of that, in fact, is actually funded mortgages. Funded mortgages is where an institution places a deposit with a financial institution, like say KMRC places, a deposit with HF or KCB, and advise KCB to have an arrangement for the staff to benefit from there. And that's what has been driving more significantly the mortgage uptake, because institutions fund them. But how many people can access that? Unless you work there and that institution has a mortgage program, you will not be able to access. But now we want a more broader wananchi access to housing. And that's why we are lengthening the tenor and we are pushing financing down market by reducing the costs of funding. And that way, we'll be able to enable a lot more people to be able to get housing. Now, more significantly though, the presence and availability of mortgages is going to be scaled up essentially because of the presence of SACCOs as mortgage providers. That has not been available in our market in Kenya. Now, it's the very first time that we now have 11 SACCOs who are participating under KMRC and who we have supported to develop capacity, develop origination arrangements, underwriting criteria and things like that through what we call technical assistance, consultancies that have helped them, and who currently have received approvals from their regulator, which is SASRA, to be able to provide mortgages. Now, the reach increases because SACCOs cover widely around the country. So we expect, because of the presence of SACCOs, a wider reach, across the country for anyone who needs a mortgage to be able to get.
All right. And as we wrap it up, Mr. Oltetia, it would be unfair for me not to ask you a question that has been in the minds of many Kenyans, and this is on the 40% access of pension for people to fund mortgages. Some say it is impractical, others are terming it not a well thought through policy. From your assessment, what was the original concept, and is it something that will work, especially looking at the demography of our civil servants and their ages in fitting into this program? So you see, the policy shift was really well thought out. The policy shift to be able to enable pensioners, or not necessarily pensioners, because that's a different definition when it comes to retirement benefits. But if you have a pension, the ability for you to access part of your pension now, and that's what they're calling 40%, or 7 million. So the issue is 40% of your pension or 7 million, the lower of that. That's the shift that was provided in that policy paper. It's so important. And the reason why it's important is because you need a house now as opposed to later, right? You need a house right now, as opposed to waiting to retire so that you can go and build a house. And that's exactly why that was shifted that way, because of the reason that as you continue to accumulate your pension, you need security. And part of that security is that home. So in my view, or at least in our view at KMRC, we believe that it's going to work. And the reason why it's going to work is that financial institutions will now be able to develop products that target that demographic. Now, pensions are not just by government, so it's not only on civil servant. So
we have already had conversations with a number of pension institutions or fund managers that are managing pensions, and they're already making arrangements with a number of financial institutions for purposes of enabling their members to be able to access. There's actually a lot of interest by people who have pensions to be able to do that, mainly those guys who are in private companies or public financial institutions, and they're making pension contributions that will essentially support them to be able to get homes. So that's also a game changer because of what it brings to the market, an additional equity class that will be able to get for you to be able to access that mortgage. Essentially, when you look at the people who are in the lower income, and assuming that based on the kind of pension they get right now, they can only access $1 million, $2 million, $1.5 million. Yeah. That will all go into a deposit, and that reduces the cost that you're going to incur to repay. Because if your house is $3 million, you pay up $1 million, you only repay $2 million through a mortgage. Mm-hmm. And that means you are now more qualified, or now you can even be able to repay. Because the other factor that will determine whether or not you qualify is your ability to repay the loan. And if you pay without an obligation to repay the $2 million or whatever amount that you have in your pension, then the obligation to repay is only based on the difference. And that essentially makes a lot more people to qualify to be able to get homes.
Oh, thank you for that clarification. And that brings us to the end of our interview today.
Thank you.
Quite an honor to speak with you. And indeed, Johnstone Oltetia, the Managing Director for KMRC, a man on a mission set to redefine the home ownership agenda in the country. He believes that the mortgage matrix is going to work and pay off in the long term. And we'll be keeping a close eye just to see how things pan out in the coming days and months. Well, this has been the Trading Bell coming to you from Upper Hill. On behalf of the entire team, it is bye-bye for now. Keep it locked on KTN News.